Well, I think it's probably maybe a little early to be a war, but maybe some of the opening skirmishes. I think what's really happened is, Google Maps are 10 years old, and as they came out, they really developed a great property, and everyone sort of went to them by default. But I think as a business needs of, especially big companies like Uber that really want to, dominate their space, what they're finding is that relying on the Google Maps interface and property, which is essentially designed as a consumer interface, doesn't meet their needs as enterprises. And so I think it may be the start of a trend you're going to see.
So regarding those trends, talk to me about what this, last 10 years ago, the dominant forces in the world of mapping, there were companies like Garmin and TomTom making devices. There were mapping companies like Magellan and a few others that had the maps. It's interesting to me that these developments are all happening away from what was the cutting edge 10 years ago with new technology.
Yeah, and I think there are a couple things that go into that. One is the maps themselves. The digital maps have become easier to collect, and you have things like OpenStreetMap that are starting to drive that, and technologies like you saw in Waze, where you have mobile devices starting to collect map data. So that's changed. The other thing about map technology is that some of the technologies that are sort of under the covers there are not very sexy, not very glamorous, hard to build and very hard to differentiate yourself positively on. So, for instance, routing, you can have a routing thing that sends you the right way 99 times, but you'll remember the one time it didn't till you die. And so it's very hard to differentiate the positive, but very hard to build. And I think, when you see things like Uber going out and buying deCarta, what they're doing, and to a great degree, is buying proven technology and getting to the market much sooner, and having a technology that they can really customize for their needs. And I think that's the key thing, more than cost, more than money, that's really going to drive it at this level.
It's interesting that these two companies, Uber and Google, which were business partners in the early days and in later days investors, and where Google made a big investment in Uber, really seem like they're setting up to be direct competitors.
Yeah, they may be, and you hear a lot about that. I think on the mapping side, when Uber started, they started using Google Maps. It's a great property. It works well. But, as they've gone along, what they see is some of their real differentiation is going to be in how precisely they tune their algorithms to dispatch drivers, to find customers, to do things like Uber Pool. And what they found is they just couldn't do that on essentially a consumer-focused app like Google Maps. And so now what they're going to do, it appears, is take that inside and really put big effort into it and develop a competitive advantage. Interestingly, it was pointed out to me on Twitter this morning, UPS has 40 people working on routing algorithms. So for people in the logistics business, this is big stuff. This is really where you're different from anyone else. And I think that is the move. Now, that's what Uber wants, but I think you can extend that to other big players in the mobile and internet space who look around and say, we want to do search different. We want a different look. We want something different that's really tuned to our business model. And that's where you'll see those companies starting to make investments in geospatial and mapping technologies.
There also seems to be a trend, to paraphrase Public Enemy, is this fear of a Google planet? Is this all of these companies thinking, I don't want to build my business where I'm dependent on Google, and I'll wake up one day and watch Bloomberg West and see that they're competing with me.
Right, and I think that one part is that, and certainly Google's been pretty aggressive getting into from the travel business, and you're using Google Maps, you scratch your head when Google launches travel-related products. But I also think the other part that's really important is Google has done such a great job on Maps because they were the first ones to understand that Maps were not just about pushing data to the user. It was also about collecting data about how the user, where he or she is, where they're going, how they're getting there, what traffic conditions are. And that data becomes key to tuning, whether it's your search or your routing algorithms. And Google gets that data, but if you're using Google Maps, you might not. And I think that's one of the things that Uber is really going to benefit from, is the ability to capture that data and really build it into a competitively differentiated product.
Well, I want to unpack that with one last question. There was a time, 10 years ago or so, where you had MapQuest and you had Yahoo with their map solution, and Google was late to the game. But this notion that the user is providing data to the company, that Google is tracking where you're going, is what you're saying Uber wants to track where I'm going, and Twitter wants to track where I'm tweeting, and Apple wants to know where I'm shopping on some level to understand their users, that user data and control over that data is really what this is about?
I think that's a key part of it. And you know, again, it may not be that they particularly want to know where you're going or I'm going. My life's less interesting than that. But in aggregate, that's super important stuff. Where people are, where they're moving. And one of the big industries you see growing is this understanding of context, user context. And one of the key signals there is location. So that ability to access a rich set of user location is a huge asset. And I think more companies are going to want to own that themselves.